Welcome to Staying Alive with CPR, the podcast for professionals working with kids, families, and schools
who want to lead with clarity, connection, and purpose.
We're your hosts, Tyler
and Lena, co-creators of Copy, Paste, Report.
Each episode pulls back the curtain on the real work in education,
sharing honest conversations, practical tools, and fresh ideas
to help you stay grounded,
grow your impact,
and keep moving forward. Welcome back to Staying Alive with CPR, the podcast where we explore the people, ideas, and practical strategies shaping the future of school psychology. Today, we are joined by Jenny Ponzerik. Jenny provides professional learning and resources for school psychologists and educators, and she hosts the podcast Tomorrow's School Psych, where she speaks with professionals about assessment, advocacy, efficiency, and the future of our field. Today, we're going to explore two areas that affect students in almost every school: executive functioning and dyslexia. We'll also learn more about Jenny's own professional journey and the resources and training opportunities she's developed for the field. Jenny, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you both for having me. I'm excited for our conversation today.
Yeah. And Jenny, today we're going to ask you some detailed questions about executive functioning, dyslexia, and school psychological practice. But before we get there, though, we would like to learn what happens when you are given absolutely no preparation time and no opportunity to create a slide deck. So if that were the situation, what is something you could give a completely unprepared 20-minute presentation about with no connection to school psychology?
That one's so hard because I present on school psychology topic. I could give you a list of things school psychology related.
Yeah.
So I know, non-school psych related. It's interesting because as I'm thinking of that question, one of the things I realize is right now in my life, I don't have very many hobbies. Like when I think back, I used to be able to give you a great talk about CrossFit. I could give you a great talk about ballroom dancing. I could give you a great talk about like certain things in my life. So if I had to give you one right now, it would likely be about morning and evening routines as it relates to be able to adapt it at different parts of your life. So for example, I travel a lot. And so I have like the greatest morning routine and evening routine for home, but how can I adapt that? So when I am traveling for fun and when I'm traveling for work. And yes, I need new hobbies. Absolutely, I need new hobbies.
No,
absolutely.
That is amazing. That is amazing and actually incredibly beneficial to anyone. Really anyone, because everyone has their own routine, but then travel just gets everything out of whack. And I feel like that would be so incredibly helpful. Now I'm very curious.
Yeah, like what's your number one tip that you would have for someone who like to kind of maintain some level of familiarity with their routine?
So one of my best things, it does not happen every single time I'm traveling, but sleep for me is one of the most important things. So when I'm traveling is trying to make sure I arrive to the hotel or wherever I'm staying in enough time for my evening routine. So I'm an early to bed kind of person. So if I'm arriving at 10 o'clock at night, that is not ideal for me. Because now my morning routine, now I'm already tired and all of those different pieces. So as much as I can for planning purposes, you know, most hotels let you check in at 3 or 4. That's my ideal time to get to a hotel. Plus, I'm paying for that time. Like, let's use all the minutes we can at a hotel.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And then the second thing would be, what are those top 2 or 3 things in the morning and the evening that help you the most? And make sure that we're doing those wherever we are. There's definitely things I do at my home that I don't always take with me. But if I think about like, these are the non-negotiables. These are the things that really help me transition into my day the most. And so instead of thinking I'm going to do 10 things when I'm traveling, what are the top 2 or 3 things that are going to really be most useful for me? And and let me just focus on that. If I have extra time, let's do extra things, but let's just
Yeah.
make sure we are focusing on those non-negotiables.
That is awesome. One thing that this made me think of, actually, you said the non-negotiables, is I really love a hot beverage, whether it's like tea or coffee. And in hotels, they always have that coffee machine that, I mean, you don't really know, right? And I I bought a travel kettle.
Like collapses.
A collapsible travel kettle. And I've traveled for quite a bit, and this is the first time I've bought it, and I took it with me, and it was a game changer. It made me feel kind of like what you're saying, the non-negotiables. It made me feel like home
Yeah.
because I was able to have a little cup of tea before I went to bed, or a cup of coffee that I could make in my, hotel room, doing it in the way that I am familiar with. So that's,
Yes.
Yeah, I
Love
don't
that.
think a lot of people think about that fact that keeping your routine is really important, and that probably one of the reasons why a lot of people dislike hotel sleep is because they didn't have their routine. And the bed's one thing, but having
Yes.
some sort of routine is also so helpful.
And how connected is this to executive functioning, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. You travel with your kettle. I travel with my white noise machine. That
Ooh, that's a
one,
good
I just
one.
have a cute travel one. I know I can get it on my phone as well, but that little travel white noise machine is super useful and super loud. So especially in hotels that have that air conditioning that comes on randomly and then is so loud and wakes you up, like this can usually cancel out most of those noises. Plus the people who are obviously having a dance party on the
Yes.
floor above me. Yes. Yes.
Of course, every time. And every time when you need to get up really early the next day, that's when
Absolutely.
the dance
Absolutely.
party happens. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, great tip. Well, let's kind of jump into some executive functioning. Executive functioning is something that's become a topic educators and many others talk about frequently. And because the term has become so broad, different people may be actually using it to mean very different things. So I'm wondering if you can tell us kind of what executive functioning actually means, and what do you think schools most commonly actually misunderstand about it?
I think when I think of executive functioning, I always think of the term set of skills. And I think when we think about what schools might misinterpret about it is we think it's one thing or just a handful of things. So executive skills or executive functioning skills to me are the set of skills that we use to get things done, to help us reach our goals. So for all of us to get here, to record this podcast, we had to use a lot of skills to get here because most of us do not record podcasts every single day. So it was a little bit out of our routine. So we had to remember different things. We had to prepare. We had to prioritize our day for those types of things. So just for us to get here into this recording session, we had to use executive functioning skills. But our students need to use them every single day when we're asking them to pay attention in class, work cooperatively in groups, get those assignments done, make and keep friendships. Like all of these different types of things have a lot of different sets of skills that need to be utilized throughout the school day. And a lot of these are part of those executive functioning skill pieces. And I think when you mention, like, it's a term being brought up a lot. And so if a teacher is concerned about executive functioning or a parent brings up that term, I feel like it's one of those terms that I immediately want to ask them, like, what do you mean by that term? Because I don't want to launch into some strategy ideas or a conversation if they're thinking about like something slightly different or a different set of skills than maybe I was thinking about. I always want to make sure we're on the same page regarding them. And I think another thing is who's in charge of teaching these skills to our students. I was just recently, we're kicking off the beginning of the school year here, and I've been having lots of conversations about back to school types of things. So having conversations with psychologists and educators, and we've had some conversations about this, about, is this the parents' responsibility to teach this? Is this the teacher's responsibility to teach this? And who's reinforcing these? And so I think there's also some different thinking, some different perspectives on who's in charge of this. But I think because it's so related to what we're asking our students to do every single day in the classroom, we are going to see some skills that are just developmentally coming on board. But a lot of these skills we do need to explicitly teach and reinforce and reinforce again and again. And just having those conversations at, for example, a middle school or junior high level of, gosh, why do I have to keep teaching this skill? Like, I always love that word, shouldn't they have already figured this out? Yeah, but they haven't. So why don't we just focus on reteaching, reinforcing, like, let's just move forward, because they don't. They showed up today in your classroom and they don't. So, yeah.
I think it's really interesting how time and time again, I feel like we have the common denominator of not thinking of things like executive functioning as skills, but more as expectations. And how much we miss out on not thinking that it's a skill, because then we have the opportunity to teach and hone in on those skills rather than just expect a kindergartner to walk in to be able to follow a 5-step routine or whatever it is.
Absolutely. We were just talking about this in a training where, if a teacher says the student blurts out, it keeps blurting out and interrupting my teaching. Well, reframing that as this student is struggling with response inhibition changes that from possibly like, why is the student doing this? It's kind of annoying my instruction. Please come in and make this kid stop. Into, this is a specific skill. It has a label to it. We can now figure out, is this a skill deficit? And do we need to teach the student? Maybe the student doesn't know that you're not supposed to blurt out, because maybe they just came back from the summer and they've been blurting out at home all day long. Or maybe last year's teacher didn't mind as much. Or is this just something that we need to reinforce? Do we need a specific strategy for this? But once we name it, I think it lends itself to more of an exploration of skill deficit strategy ideas, more so than just venting behavior issue.
Well, and I think that really is a great kind of separation between thinking, oh, is the student not able to do that because they are lacking the skills? Or does the student have the skills, but they're just choosing not to, or something is preventing them from showcasing those skills? And so along with that, given your expertise in this area, how would you suggest that educators distinguish kind of the won't do versus can't do?
I think one of the things for us to think about is that consistency piece. So if it's they won't do, this is what we're presented with. They're not doing, maybe we'll word it like that. They're not doing the math assignment. Are they never doing any assignments? Are they not doing this math assignment? Are they not doing any math assignments? Is it just in this period of time of the day? Is it third period? Is it all day long? Like, I think when we start either asking the questions or doing those observations, two things that school psychologists love doing, right? As we're trying to gather more information and that data collection that we like to be doing, is to help us figure out, is this I'm not doing this math assignment right now because I don't know how to do the math assignment? Is it because I'm stressed right now? Is it because the student next to me is making so much ruckus that I can't pay attention? Like, what is it that's going on? Or is this a student who never does math and never does
Mhm.
reading and never does writing? Like,
Mhm.
all of these situations, like the strategy ideas are going to be very different.
Right.
But a lot of times, what we're presented with at a meeting or a consultation is they're not doing their math assignment when I ask them
Mhm.
to do it. And
Mhm.
so I think we have to be cautious about a lot of times we just want to jump in and like solve the problem. And we have to be careful because we want to make sure we're solving the correct problem. And
Mhm.
so we have to ask the questions or do those observations to really figure out, is this, I can't do the work or I don't have the skill of task initiation, or is there something else that's getting in the way so that we can use the right strategy for this situation?
Mhm.
I wonder too, I've never been a classroom teacher before, but I wonder if it's frustrating for a teacher, or they want the issue to not be a can't do because there's no time in the day to teach the skills, especially if it's just one student that may have the skill deficit. And I'm just thinking, like, a teacher may come to you and be like, I don't have time for that because where am I supposed to fit in an executive functioning intervention? How do they know? Where do they access the materials to even know how to fix the issue? And our staff even trained in it either? Is our special education staff, is our school counselor, our school psychologist trained in executive functioning? Those are things that come to my mind when I think about, like, if this is a can't do or won't do issue.
Mhm. Well, and I think you brought up a really great point. Is this a single student concern? Is this a small group concern? Is this a whole class, a whole grade level, a whole school concern?
Mhm.
Because again, our strategies are going to be very different. If this is a single student concern, yeah, it's going to be difficult for a gen ed teacher who has 25 other kids to be like, let me do this one strategy for this one student. Now,
Mhm.
rarely have I come across a gen ed classroom where it is just a one student type of concern.
Yeah.
But of course, that can happen, or it's the most extreme situation with a single student.
Hmm.
Um, but a lot of times it can be more of a small group or a whole class type of thing. And then we can't do a short lesson. And then one of the things, because teachers always say we don't have time, absolutely. You have to do all these standards. There's so many things. And then some school psychologist is coming in and telling you, here's something else to do. I get that.
Mhm.
So we have to figure out who is the best person to do this lesson, to do this teaching. It could be that teacher. It could be someone pulling the student out. It could be a special education teacher, a school counselor, a school psychologist, however your school is set up. And then, to me, the best way to reinforce and practice is in the routines, is in like the transitions and the routines of the classroom, because we're always asking kids to start assignments or to transition, and I need for you to stop doing this behavior and move to this behavior. So there's lots, I think, different ways to practice things and
Hmm.
reinforce things instead of always figuring out, how am I going to do this for this one particular student? Think about how often a student needs to use this skill throughout the day in just our normal everyday teaching, and how can we reinforce, remind them of a strategy that somebody else taught them.
Mhm.
Hmm.
I think there's so many different, depending on the age level, right, grade level of the student we're talking about. There's some incredible storybooks for our littles that can be read. We have so many teachers, of course, that are still reading aloud to their students, whether they're the younger students or chapter books. There's so many books that are available that talk about response inhibition and how to pay attention and how to
Yeah.
be a good friend and how to deal with your emotions. Like, there are ways that could be easily put into, again, a teacher's everyday routine, which is we take time every day to read a little bit of a story out loud. Now, high school math teacher in algebra might not be doing that every single day.
Yeah.
That might look very different. So I think it's going to be very dependent on, of course, the age and grade and the development of the student.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's well said, and it puts, an important onus on elementary teachers to have good tier 1 curriculum and instruction that does address this, not just the academic components, because ultimately when we go out into the job world, those skills are so critical, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But as we kind of move into talking about, maybe you've identified a student has some deficits, maybe it's in reading and math, and you're going to be doing an evaluation for that student. A lot of times when we do evaluations, the executive functioning might be a component that we want to evaluate because we've seen through observations and teacher input that is a concern. And a rating scale is often a great way that we collect information to get more objective ratings on how that person compares to their peers in certain skills. But obviously a rating scale isn't everything, and it's not the one measure or thing that we should do if we're looking into executive functioning and how to help the kid. So in your experience, when should executive functioning become part of a school psychological evaluation, and what information should evaluation teams gather beyond just a rating scale?
Yeah. I like that you first brought up rating scales because so many school psychologists are using rating scales as just part of our complete evaluation. So the BASC looks at executive functioning. The Connors looks at executive functioning. There are rating scales that are much more specific, like the Brief or the Cepheid, that look specifically at executive functioning. But every time you walk into a classroom and observe a student, you are also looking at executive functioning. Like we're looking at the student's ability to sustain their attention. If a teacher asks the student to start an assignment and they're sitting there doing nothing for 3 minutes, you're jotting that down. You're looking at a task initiation issue. If you have a student who has a complete meltdown because someone placed a demand on them, you're jotting that down in the observation. That's emotional control. So I think we have to be cautious about thinking we always have to go find some magical test that's going to look at these skills. Rating scales are going to give us some great information, but so is your observation. So are going to be your parent input and interview forms and your teacher input forms. Like if we think about the questions we already asked, many of them are related to executive functioning. Now, I went back and got my school neuropsych certificate. I can give the fancy, executive functioning test too. I can give NEPSI subtest and DCAF subtest, and sometimes I absolutely do. And what we always have to remember with the one-on-one test is that you are in an ideal situation when we're administering and collecting that information. We are supposedly in a quiet room. I am telling the student when to start and stop. We're usually doing practice items and I'm providing feedback. Sometimes the test itself is providing feedback. So I think there's a space and time for those tools, absolutely. And a lot of times I want to know, does this student actually have the skill? Like in an ideal environment, does the student have this skill?
Yeah.
But the rating scales to me are that next step of, are they using this skill? Because I can have the most amazing skill in a quiet setting in a room, but when I'm in a classroom with 25 other kids, do I recognize like this is the time to activate this skill? And the teacher said this is going to be on the test. Oh, this is the time to pay attention. And I should probably do a memory strategy here. She's still talking. I still have to keep paying attention. Like that to me is part of the actual reflection of are you using these executive functioning skills? How is your performance of these skills? So I think
Yeah.
there's lots of different ways to look at them. And I think school psychologists are looking at them. If we just looked at the fancy words that are all these executive skills and then think about what we're looking at in our observations and our teacher input forms, we're gathering a lot of data outside of the Basque and the Connors.
That's a really good point. I didn't actually think about that before, that when you were saying like, okay, you do the NEPSI and you test the skills and the scores come out to be where it's not a deficit, it's not a significant concern compared to peers. But the classroom teacher saying, I disagree. I don't think they have those skills. You go in and do observations and you find out, oh, well, maybe they have the skill in that situation where it has all those factors you described, but they can't apply it. That might change the difference in an evaluation of how you deliver services. You don't need to pull the student out for direct special education services to teach a skill. They have the skill. It's pushing into the classroom to reinforce the skill.
Or
Or
to
maybe they even
remind the
have
student. Oh, go
yeah.
ahead.
No, I was going to say they have that skill in isolation, and then they would need kind of what you were probably about to say, a reminder when to use that skill, kind of a cue of, you understand, for example, even, with our standardized assessments with a distractor, to be able to, move from one activity to another, or, attend to the tasks that you need to. But then when you're in an actual situation and you want to attend to different things and your friends are playing, how do you distinguish what to pay attention to?
Well, and I think this also brings up, when we're evaluating students and we're getting multiple respondents to fill out forms for us, right? Either parent and teacher or multiple teachers. And a lot of times we get different people who see different things. And we'll have one person who says, oh, yeah, they can totally do that skill. There's no issue. And then the next person's like, what are you talking about? That student definitely can't do that skill. And I think it's important for us to think about in those situations, when one person sees it, that could tell us they have that skill. So why aren't we seeing it everywhere else? Because I don't know about the both of you, but I don't show up the same exact way in every single setting of my life. I show up a little bit differently on this podcast than I might show up at my home, right? I always say if my husband filled out a Basque about me at home, that might look a little bit different than my colleagues, right? If they filled out a Basque about me, because we show up differently. There's different expectations in different settings. And sometimes the third period classroom provides a lot of accommodations, and that teacher provides those extra breaks that the student needs. They anticipate those needs, and therefore they don't see a lot of those emotional regulation issues. But fifth period teacher maybe just doesn't see them for whatever reason. So we see a different version of that kid. Well, I think it's important for us in those situations to go look in third period and go look in fifth period, and then figure out what they're doing in third period and go figure out how we get fifth period teacher to do that a little bit more.
Right.
Because the student has the skill in certain situations.
I think that you brought something up earlier, that school psychologists are really good at looking for and looking at patterns. And I think that's exactly kind of what you were alluding to, is what kind of patterns are we seeing in situations where these executive functioning skills are seen as, typical, and then what are not seen as typical in another situation, where what patterns are we seeing that might differ? And as you said, what are we doing in that fifth period class that we can do in that other class, or vice versa? So thinking about executive functioning skills, because there's so many of them, typically in the school setting, in your opinion, what do you feel like tends to create the greatest amount of difficulty when we think about executive functioning skills?
There's so many different ways to break down executive skills. There's some frameworks that think there's only 3 skills. There's other frameworks that think there's more than 30. When I think, though, about the skills that I kind of hear most often from teachers as being areas of concern, they tend to fall, for me, in three main categories. One of them is that response inhibition, right? They're being impulsive. It's causing discipline issues, behavior issues. Um, Administrators are bringing it up. Kids are getting into fights. Attention, of course. So many students, of course, are being brought up because of attentional concerns.
hmm
And then the third one I would say is emotional control. A lot of our students are really struggling with figuring out how to deal with frustration. We know that we have so many more students who have mental health concerns, and so many of our students with IEPs have goals that are really addressing understanding your feelings and having coping strategies.
hmm
Like, it's interesting because we see it a lot, but we see it a lot because we have a lot of students who struggle
Right.
still with those kind of basic skills. Like, can you
Mhm.
describe the way you're feeling? And do you have a strategy for dealing with anger, and a different strategy for dealing with frustration, and a different feeling for anxiety or stress? So I would say those are probably the top three: the response
hmm
inhibition, the attention, and the emotional control.
I'm curious, thinking about those skills and with the amount of technology, and now we're thinking about AI and all of that stuff, how do you feel like that kind of plays into the world of executive functioning skills in school and then outside of school?
Well, I think we've all read all the information that all of this technology is not helping anyone's attention span. I think for a very long time, when we've thought about like what a typical attention span is, we've typically seen the research show it's about 1 to 2 minutes per
hmm
year of age. So for a 4-year-old, we would think that they could pay attention between 4 and 8 minutes. And there's a plateau to that. About 15 to 20 minutes is the plateau for human beings. So that's why most of the time TED Talks kind of top out around 18 minutes, because that's where adults' attention spans top out as well. And
hmm
so I think number one, the question is, are our classrooms being developmentally appropriate? Are we asking our classrooms that have 5 and 6-year-olds to pay attention longer than what is developmentally appropriate? Are we asking them and expecting them? I'm going to go back to that word you used. The expectations are the expectations that they're sitting like a star and listening to a story for 15 minutes. That's way beyond the developmental
hmm
expectation for a 5-year-old, or sitting and doing an independent work assignment. We want to make sure that is first secure. But of course, everyone's being on the technology, the fact that we can watch all these videos. There's so much of the research nowadays that all these super quick videos are also really bad for our attention spans as well.
hmm
And I think it's very challenging for teachers to try and compete with that, because their lessons are not 30 seconds long,
hmm
not
Yeah.
exciting
Yeah.
in that kind of way. And so I think with technology, we have to think about how that's impacting our students. But if we also want to think about how AI could be useful for us in education, going back to a question that came up before, I don't have time to think of a long and way to provide instruction for this strategy.
hmm
We want to move AI to our advantage would be, I am a third grade classroom teacher. I have 7 minutes in this kind of setting. I have a student who blurts out constantly, can you give me 5 ideas about a way to provide instruction to this student? Or
hmm
I have 5 students who do this. What is a short lesson to help me here?
hmm
Mhm.
So while technology, I think, is harming all of our brains, there's research to show that, I
hmm
think we can also use the technology we have in front of us right now to also help support
hmm
in those instances where, do I have a book on my shelf that I have to go find to go figure out what's the right strategy? We can also ask AI right now for some strategy ideas. And I think it's super useful because we can put in our context and our parameters. I don't have 30 minutes to do a lesson. I have 5 minutes to do a lesson. AI will give us a 5-minute lesson. And they'll give us like 25 ideas, and then it'll be like, would you like me to come up with the visuals for you and a slide deck? And you're like, yes, thank you so much for all of that for me. And so I think that while we're frustrated with it, we can also use it to our advantage right now in our world.
So it sounds like we continue to need to develop those skills and kind of work that muscle of executive functioning, but still utilize this technology to help us, achieve whatever we want to achieve in a shorter amount of time.
Absolutely. I've used AI when I'm looking for some strategy ideas for my own executive skill challenges, because if I can hone in, most of us as adults, we can specify like, okay, I have a challenge in this area, but it might not show up in every aspect of my world, but it shows up in this part of my world. And so I think we can ask AI, like, I always ask for 25. What are 25 ideas? I'm a school psychologist. This is what's going on. And then I always ask for 25 ideas because out of 25, I usually can pick one that sounds like a good idea and I'm willing to do. If I only ask for 3, a lot of times I don't like any of them. But 25, usually I'll find one I can get on board with.
That's a good suggestion, 25. I'll use that too when I'm looking for things.
It makes me think about that, like as school psychologists, we are working in an environment that requires an extraordinary amount of planning, prioritization, flexibility, time management, self-monitoring ourselves. And on any day, a school psych might be, switching between doing an evaluation, a consultation, responding to a crisis, a meeting, or even just like an email. And I'm wondering, what's one executive functioning skill that you wish every school psychologist could have, and why?
This might be a little selfish because it's one I wish I had a little bit better in certain areas of my life, but I've worked with a number of school psychologists and provided executive functioning coaching for them who struggle with executive functioning skills. And I would say one that would be near the top of the list is task initiation. Because I think all of us could choose at least one thing in our world of school psychology that we procrastinate, whether it's report writing, which is mine, or the school psychologists who don't like to pick up the phone and make the phone calls, or the school psychologist who just doesn't want to go down and deal with that teacher that they know they have to go talk to. And so instead, what we're doing is we're wasting time. We're wasting energy. We're wasting a whole bunch of things, just putting things off. But it's always in the back of our head. And so we're always like, I should be doing this, but I'm going to be doing this instead. And so when I think about, again, I'm going to tell on myself, I've been in this field for over 25 years. I procrastinate report writing just as much today than I have over the last 25 years. And so what does that cause me? I will put time on my calendar for report writing. I do. I will put a 3-hour chunk of time, like that's what we're going to do. But I will only spend 25 minutes of those 3 hours actually report writing. That ruins my next couple of days or weeks because I didn't use that time the way that I had originally intended to. And now I'm messing up some other part of my time. And so now I have to have other strategies. And I will tell you, AI can't help me with some of these strategies. But right now, when I really, really need to get this report writing done, I literally have a reminder on my phone the day before that says, you have to finish this report tomorrow, Jenny. It's a reminder the day before so that my brain starts thinking, this is important, this is urgent. And then I just keep moving the reminder every hour. And then the next morning, the reminder says, you have to finish this report today, Jenny. And so that sense of urgency, because I think a lot of times we go, that sounds like a tomorrow problem. And we just keep putting it off. But guess what? Tomorrow's booked. So's the next day. Like no school psychologist has ever been like, well, I have nothing to do next week. Like, no. So whether it's that 10-minute phone call we're procrastinating, or that observation we just don't want to go in that classroom. I just wish that we just had that strategy that just do it. Just go do it so that we can focus that energy that we're spending, like being disappointed with ourselves that we didn't do it, on something else, like figuring out what's going on with that student.
It's funny to me that you say that, because that's an issue I have, as well as the task initiation. I'm sure a lot of school psychologists and many professionals have it. But what's interesting to me is it's never reinforced enough, because when I do start a task and I complete it, I feel great about myself. In fact, after I start the task, I'm like, this is actually much easier than I thought. Maybe it's calling a parent, and I end up having a wonderful conversation with the parent.
It's not ever as bad as you think it's going to be.
It's never as bad, but it never reinforces me enough to then be like, okay, it's just, I'm going to do it right now. You know, I'm always still that level of like, I don't really want to do it. I just find that so interesting that maybe some people just have that natural reinforcement built in, but man, I do not.
But I think it's because we're reinforced by it not being that bad. It still gets done. So it's the still getting done, no matter how many times we procrastinated, that is continuing to reinforce us not doing it in that right second.
Yeah. I think sometimes we procrastinate things because we think it's going to take too long. I remember when I first really got into this, I was part of this online program, and they had us talk about something that you put off all the time, just like an everyday kind of task, not even like writing a report, which is not a quick task, right? And they said, just actually time yourself, like estimate how much time you think it takes, and then go do the task and time yourself. And so I chose emptying the dishwasher, because in my head, emptying the dishwasher takes forever. No, it doesn't. It takes less than 5 minutes. It takes less than 5 minutes to do. But it's like, going back to what you said, Tyler, I needed the evidence to actually remind myself the next time. Because guess what? The next time I had to go empty the dishwasher, what was my first reaction? It's going to take forever. And then I had to go, oh, no. You actually timed yourself, Jenny. This is going to take less than 3 minutes. You have 3 minutes right now. Just go do it. But I needed that evidence to remind myself of that piece. So I'm curious, Tyler, if you wrote it down or something like that, like it was actually better than I thought, or what were some feelings? Oh, I got a sense of relief after it was done. And if you had that near the phone or whatever it was, to bring back that memory, because I think it just goes away. And it's hard for us to bring that back up the next time that task comes up.
Wow. Well, you've given me something I'm definitely going to be trying for the school year.
I'll let you know, Jenny, how he does, especially with the dishwasher, too. Well, I think that along with executive functioning, one of the things that keeps being brought up in the world of education is dyslexia. And we know that those two are very much related in some of the different deficits students have. So because this is kind of a thing that a lot of educators talk about and a lot of parents talk about as well, a lot of times we have parents inquiring about dyslexia, about testing for dyslexia. So I guess one of the things that we keep coming to is that there isn't, as we talked about with executive functioning, there isn't a specific test or a specific rating scale or the one thing that we can do to then see whether there are deficits in that particular area. But when, let's just say, a school psychologist is sitting in a meeting and a parent comes in and the parent says, "Are you going to test my kid for dyslexia?" So in that situation, how should or would a school psychologist respond in the way that is accurate, reassuring, and collaborative in that circumstance?
Well, I will kick it off with how I used to respond and how not to respond, because I think this word in the world of special education has really changed over the last couple of decades, because when I started in this field and parents said, can you look at my kid for dyslexia? I would literally say things like, we don't do that here.
Mm-hmm.
That's a medical diagnosis. Go talk to your doctor. And I can't even believe I used to say things like that and I didn't get into trouble. Because now, if a doctor wrote on a prescription pad, this child has dyslexia and needs an IEP, my reaction would be, who do you think you are? Like, this is my realm now, right? Like, things just shift in our world. So how would I
Yes.
respond nowadays? I would not say that anymore. Similar to what I said with executive functioning, the very first thing I would say is there are many definitions for the word dyslexia. What do you mean by that term? Because I think a lot of us in the schools, a lot of our states have adopted guidelines, handbooks related to the word dyslexia, and many of our states utilize the definition that comes from the International Dyslexia Association. And not every parent is thinking that's the definition. We still have a lot of people who work in education and, our families as well, who still are talking about BD reversals. And in our head, we're like, oh, we kind of got rid of that one a long time ago. Like, that's not how we think about it at all. But that's how a lot of people still think about it. And so I think before responding to the question, I want to make sure that we have a common definition, because I don't want to respond in one way and then the parent has a completely different definition in their head. But I think nowadays, if we were going to move forward with an evaluation, my response would be, of course, we're going to look at reading. Of course, that goes under our big area of learning disabilities. So we are, of course, going to look at how your student is decoding, how quickly your student can read, and all the different reasons behind success in reading. We are going to look at that. Many states do and are okay with their psychologists within their evaluation reports kind of commenting about the word dyslexia in there. But one of the things I definitely want to ensure the parent understands is that we're going to talk about learning disabilities in the eligibility section of our report. Like, I'll talk about dyslexia. I will use the definition from IDA, but we still need to say that the child is eligible under specific learning disabilities. So I want to make sure at the beginning of the process that they're aware that we're going to kind of talk about both of them. But do our teams look at dyslexia? Absolutely. We do really thorough evaluations for learning disabilities. And we look at decoding and we look at fluency, and most of us look at spelling, and that's the academic portion of the IDA definition. So I think most of us could easily respond to, are you going to look at my child for dyslexia? Of course, that's what we do. We're really awesome at that. It's just a lot of us are uncomfortable with that term because we haven't responded to that for many, many, many years. We had a very different response to that comment. And I think it was back in 2015 is when the U.S. Department of Education gave us all permission to use the word aloud and gave us all permission to use the word in our report. And I think that alleviated a lot of the stress on behalf of a lot of school psychologists of like, yeah, we actually can write that word in the report. But that document also very much emphasizes, but your job is to look at SLD. Like we're still looking at eligibility as part of our process here.
Yeah. I'll never forget, I had a parent that I worked with. This was probably 10 years ago and was kind of prior to that time when, like you said, my response was like, oh, we don't do that in the schools. I explained really well that the deficit was phonological processing, that otherwise their cognitive ability was totally average, maybe even above average. They had a deficit in decoding. I said, this is a learning disability in reading. And the parent goes, oh, God, good. I thought you were going to say my child has dyslexia. and I was like, well, that's the exact same thing I just said, like that, and fortunately in Kansas, a couple of years ago, a law passed actually that now requires education teams, if you're looking at a learning disability, you actually have to say whether the child does have dyslexia or not.
Meets the academic or the like the eligibility
Yeah,
for dyslexia.
as part of their special education eligibility. So we report that to the state now, which I think opens up that conversation a lot more naturally to parents as it's just a part of the evaluation.
I was just going to say, it's so interesting because like so many things in this country related to special ed, it varies state by state. I was just talking to someone yesterday who is now currently practicing in California, which is where I'm from, and had done their training in another state. And they were just like, yeah, back when they did their training, they didn't even have different classifications for eligibility in that state. It was just you were eligible or not.
Yeah. Yep.
And they didn't even have categories. And they were just talking about like this student went to another state, and it wasn't until they went to the other state that someone actually finally told the family like their child was intellectually disabled. Like they just thought they had a learning disability, and the parent was like, that would have been important for someone to have told me. Like it's so interesting how all of our states vary on how we talk about things like dyslexia.
Yeah. I do think that it's cool, I guess, that dyslexia or, autism, all of those kind of words or terms are not like dirty words anymore or dirty terms. They're more accepted and, they're looked at in such a different light. And I think that is such a wonderful service to our educational community and to our kids who end up having categories like that, because it empowers people to seek those things out rather than shy away from them.
Absolutely. I agree.
Well, Jenny, you host your own podcast, Tomorrow's School Psych, where you've spoken with professionals about assessment, advocacy, efficiency, and the future of the field, including us.
Yes.
One of the benefits of hosting those conversations is that you're continually exposed to new ideas, different approaches, and perspectives from people doing innovative work. From those conversations, what's the most interesting idea or perspective a guest has shared with you?
It is so hard for me to pick a favorite, especially talking to both of you here. I think in reflection on that, I would put my guest in kind of two main categories. I have guests who talk about things that they're doing in their world as school psychologists that put me in such awe and reminder of like, the field's so big, and a lot of us don't get the opportunity to do all of the things, right? We have our NAS 10 domains. Not everyone gets to do the 10 domains every single day, right? A lot of us are just kind of in that evaluate, write reports, have a meeting. Let's do that again. And so when I get to talk to people who are spending time advocating or spending time really helping to support the social emotional functioning of their students, providing direct services, honestly, in those conversations, it just reminds me of how amazing our field is, but then also reminds me like, go look up some more stuff. Like this is a constant learning environment for us, and we can never ever know it all. And so it's just that reminder of like, there's still more to learn. And so it's just like, I have this ongoing list of, in that extra free spare time, hey, go remind yourself about that topic and go remind yourself about that topic. So that's probably one of my groups. And then my other group is me being in awe of people who just create things like the two of you, as well as so many other people who just are like, I see a problem and I'm going to create a solution, not just for students, but for other school psychologists, whether it's something awesome to help us with report writing, which we know takes up so much of our time, or talking to people who have created different ways to look at our data and analyze our data in more efficient ways, or figuring out, hey, students need a different way to communicate about their needs. And so we created this way that they can text us their information, and it just blows my mind.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just so thankful that everyone has all of our unique brains, because
Yeah.
my brain would never go there. Like, my brain would never once be like, I should go create a report writing program that integrates AI into, like, my brain would just be like, I didn't even know you could do that. And so I'm so thankful that there's these super creative human beings that see problems, and then their brains are like, and I'm going to think of a solution, and then I'm going to go make that solution available to other people.
Mhm.
So I think, again, it's so hard for me to pick favorites, but those are kind of the two groups of people that I get to talk to.
Mhm.
And I just have a long list of either people I am so thankful for, or people who would just remind me of some topics that I need to go do some deep diving into.
That's really, really well said, because every single time we've talked to anybody, even, beyond our podcast, I have also an ongoing list of things that I'd like to check out. Like, oh, that was a great point. I'd love to learn more about that. Or, oh, wow, that's an amazing resource. Let me check that out. So that's absolutely, agree with that 100%. Well, speaking of amazing resources, you've also created the jennyponzerik.com, an amazing place with just some incredible resources, trainings, professional learning opportunities. So, kind of take us back to what inspired you to build that kind of platform and begin offering all these amazing supports.
I just knew school psychologists are always looking for resources, and I just had some, and I wanted to share them with other people. And I don't think I realized when I first started offering how much of a need there was. You talk to some school psychologists, and so you're like, oh, well, I either have that or I could create that. Because again, my brain can easily
Mm-hmm.
create something. And
Mhm.
so let me put that together, and then here you go. And then for other people to be like, oh my goodness, like that's amazing. And you're like, oh, okay, that's great. Awesome. Awesome. And then that just turns into another one and turns into another one. I think one of the amazing things that I get to do is I get to do a lot of trainings. I get to provide a lot of professional development for school psychologists and special education teachers and SLPs. And so I get to hear what a lot of these concerns are from a school district level.
Mm-hmm.
So, people keep asking me, could you talk on this topic? Can you talk on this topic? Which makes me realize there's a need for some information in these areas. But then also, what are the questions that people are asking?
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, gosh, wouldn't it be great if we could just come up with some resources so that we could share these different things? Because being a school psychologist is amazing and super challenging. It
Mm-hmm.
is an amazing calling for school psychologists. And day to day is very, very challenging. You have to use a lot of your executive functioning skills yourself, but you're pulled in 9,000 directions. You
Mhm.
hear a lot of very heavy things throughout your day. And so if I can provide some help and support based on what my brain is able to do really well, I love to be able to provide that for school psychologists. Absolutely.
That's awesome.
Great. Well, I mean, you said that you have trainings that you offer. Can you share a little bit about the trainings, workshops, and ongoing PD that you offer?
Yes. So I definitely, like I mentioned, do a lot of professional development for school districts and different regions and different things like that. Typically on my website, if I know that a training is open to other people, I usually will also put information about that on the website.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes I'll be doing, obviously the school district is hiring me, so it's not open to other people, but sometimes there are opportunities. So I like to let people know about those. But I also have some online communities that I've created that have some on-demand trainings for school psychologists. Here in California, a lot of our school districts for learning disabilities use the pattern of strengths and weaknesses model.
Mm-hmm.
I know not everyone does, and that's a super controversial topic. So, but for those that do use it and like it, I provide an online platform called PSW Monthly, where we have a lot of on-demand videos, and I provide virtual support for those who have questions about that. And then I created another platform called the Prepared School Psych Community, where I always say that's all the other parts of our job except PSW. So it has resources for all areas of eligibility. And then for those that do a lot of consultation or behavior support or counseling, we've created some professional development 2-3 hour training series, but also some quicker videos. And then myself and I have 3 content specialists. We're available on a regular basis, either through Zoom and live office hours, or we have like a community forum where people can ask questions. I just always know there's those school psychologists who are out there in the world who have that question and they're not quite sure where to go. And some schools psychologists and school districts have amazing mentorships and lead psychologists and wonderful places they could go to. And not everyone is in that school district. So I wanted to provide a space for people who don't have that easy access to all of those resources. So
Sounds amazing. And we'll be linking that within our podcast. So if you're listening, please check out those that website and those links to the different professional development opportunities.
Absolutely. And I think, Jenny, you bring up a good point, that everybody has access to really, really solid professional development when we're talking about shortages. And we're talking about how some school psychologists are the only school psychologists in their school district or whatever it may be. And so utilizing services that you provide, it's incredibly important to continue to build on some of the skills that we've learned as school psychologists and kind of be up on the research. So thank you for sharing that with the world, because that is just incredibly valuable and important.
thank you so much.
Well, Jenny, today's conversation has highlighted how important it is to look beyond the surface of students' performance. An unfinished assignment does not tell us why the student was unable to complete it. A rating scale does not tell the entire story of executive functioning. And a single test score cannot capture the full nature of students' reading difficulties. And as you've taught us today and throughout our conversation, we know that our responsibility is to ask better questions, gather information from multiple sources, and translate what we learn into support that makes meaningful difference for students, and not just throwing something out in the wind and hoping that it'll work. And we just are so, so grateful for you sharing your knowledge, your time, your resources, and just your perspective with us today.
Thank you both for having me.
And to thank you, and I want to say thank you to everyone listening. As you return to your work, consider this question. When a student appears unmotivated, disorganized, inattentive, or inconsistent, have we identified the student's underlying difficulty, or have we simply described what the difficulty looks like from the outside? Keep learning, keep asking better questions, and keep doing the work that helps students succeed. Until next time.